Hello and welcome to what I think is episode 273 of the Huntsman Hill podcast. There's a pretty good reason for us to be confused. We've had some significant technical difficulties in recent weeks. My fault, really. In fact, we recorded an entire episode that I was really happy with. I thought was really, really fun about one-hit wonders, and then I somehow completely fucked up the recording, and that has gone to the ether, never to be heard again. We will get back to that in a few short weeks. We're trying to get the ground back beneath us, but let's kind of pause, have our welcomes, and then we can get into tonight's topic. No Glenn tonight. Glenn is traveling for work. I'm going back and forth with my earpod, and not because we're having audio challenges today. I don't know what the fuck is going on, if there's a full moon or I don't know what it is, but some challenges anyway. Rodney Hill, good to see you, my friend. Me and you back in the saddle for a duo today. How you doing, bud?
Doing good. We even had a few little challenges leading up to getting on the air for this one, but hopefully all those bugs are worked out. I did get a cryptic message on my phone from somewhere in the outer Milky Way that I can only hope are some aliens enjoying our One Hit Wonders episode, but we'll have to see what their comments are. In the meantime, happy to be here tonight. It is back to the old Huntsman Hill original format, and you came up with this week's subject, and I'm glad you did. I think it's going to be fun.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a fun one. This is a record I love dearly and have loved since right around when it came out. But you and I have never talked about Modest Mouse. Well, that's not true. We've talked briefly about Modest Mouse, and then I know your wife is a fan of the band, and that you either just went to see them or you're about to see them. So I want to hear all about that. So I'm excited to get into the topic. We are talking about Modest Mouse's second album from 1997, The Lonesome Crowded West. I love this record. I have a lot to say about this record and this band. And I'm very, very excited to get your perspective on this band, because this is that era, that sort of late 90s, early 2000s era where it's a bunch of music, some of my favorite music of all time, frankly, that you and I and Glenn never connected over. So, we weren't really talking much at that time, if at all. And so your feelings about specific bands and specific albums is kind of lost to me. So I love talking about this era just to know what you were doing and what you were into. So, I want to talk about that. I'll calibrate the record and the band in just a second, because we've never talked about Modest Mouse, but you can tell I'm excited. But before that, let me just check in with you, man. How are you? We did talk last week, although, again, lost forever. How are you, and what's going on? Any good musical happenings?
Well, yeah, Modest Mouse, for example. And we did. I think this might be lost to the listeners, because we might have discussed it on the For Now Lost episode. Although I think we agreed that it's going to be re-recorded and come back in some form. But my spring and early summer has been, the joke of me not ever seeing shows has been defied. Like, I've been seeing a lot of good music, and that continued 2 nights ago on Monday, the 1st of July, when I got to see Modest Mouse again right here in my hometown, which always makes it a little more special too, in a very good small club. They were the last band that we saw prior to the pandemic at the same venue, which was a really special show. So it was interesting to see how things were going to sort of compare 3.5 years later, and with a pandemic in between both those shows. So and we'll talk more about that as we get the show going. But so it's been a fun run of getting to see some good live music.
Does Modest Mouse have some connection to Aspen that you're aware of? Because and you tell me, but my impression is that they're, not every band obviously goes through Aspen. They seem like a pretty decent sized band to go through town. And you said that if they've been there twice in, 5 years or whatever, Any idea if there's a connection or a whatever?
No, and in fact, I think there's maybe not, based on one thing that Isaac said during the show on Monday. Although I do like this, that Monday was to be the last night of their current tour, and they added a whole second night and stuck around for Tuesday. So they must like it. And I know he likes it because at some point Isaac said, how many people actually live here in Aspen? And there was a smattering of hands raised. And he said something to the effect of like, "That's a really nice place." But so I think if he had any serious deep connection, it probably would have gone more. A lot of times it's just like the club owner or and the promoter who is our bookers, who are now actually the owner's kids, adult kids, maybe are just really big Modest Mouse fans. It might be something as simple as that. But beyond that, I don't know of any deep personal connection.
We make reference to it regularly on the show. That being your not only love of, but I would describe as expertise in geography. I am a long way from an expert, and in fact, I'm a little bit handicapped often in geography. Wait, where is that in comparison to that? Outside of Southern California, I'll get lost real quick. So, when you think about a band's touring schedule, you think about the West Coast. It's like, well, a band will go from Los Angeles to maybe Santa Barbara to to the South Bay to San Francisco to Oregon, whatever, blah blah blah. Is Aspen in any kind of discernible geographic tour route for a band? Like, is it a natural spot, or is somebody having to go way out of their way from Denver and whatever the next city might be to get to Aspen?
Yes and no. It's on Interstate 70, which connects, a good central part of the United States, from Western Utah all the way to like Maryland, I think. But I think it's more Denver serves that purpose. There's more clubs, bigger clubs, right, all sure. of that. And so I think that's where that falls in, because, Denver's the only, on Interstate 70, Denver's the only city between basically Kansas City and Southern California. If you head a little north, you can do the route that goes Salt Lake City, Boise, Portland, Seattle, that.
Right.
But even then, Denver's still sort of a stopgap between those points. So Aspen does get some shows because of that. But I think Denver benefits more from that, just being the bigger city.
So let's use Modest Mouse as the example. If they played in Aspen, does that mean they didn't play in Denver? Or they also played in Denver?
So I was looking, and I think I don't know if they played in Denver last week on this stop through. I should have researched that a little bit better. There is that whole weird thing, which I don't fully understand, but that I've talked to people a little bit about, that there is some sort of geographic clause, right, that people will throw out there, like if we're gonna book you, you can't play anywhere.
Yeah. Proximity laws.
Yeah. So, and I don't fully understand those. Anyways, but Aspen does get a little bit of that. They and certainly, like, let's say if bands had played here before and really like it, they're like Modest Mouse as an example. Maybe they made it a point to like, yeah, we're gonna book that and play there.
I know that the distance is greater, but it's an LA Orange County thing too, where a lot of bands, national bands, will play Orange County and LA, but it's equally as common, as for a band to just play one or the other. Mm-hmm. The first leg of their tour, they'll play in LA, they'll go tour the rest of the country, and then swing back and play Orange County kind of at the back end of the tour or whatever. Yeah. So I wondered if there was and again, I know that the proximity is different, but if there was a similar relationship between Aspen and Denver.
Not really, because Aspen's such a small town. Like, right. and now unfortunately there's essentially one venue, so it doesn't quite pan out in the same way.
Got it. Okay, well look, I want to hear about the show. and I want to hear about your relationship with this band. I didn't realize you've seen them at least twice. It sounds like. But let's set this up a little bit. Let me just calibrate a little bit because again, we've never talked about Modest Mouse. Fans obviously know this, but we'd like to set the scene a little bit. The band was formed in 1993 in Issaquah, Washington, by singer guitarist Issac Brock, drummer Jeremiah Green, and bassist Eric Judy. It's funny, and we'll get into this when we talk, but I know they are. I've loved this band for a long time. I never think of Modest Mouse as a trio, and they haven't been for a long time, so that's probably why. But we'll get into it. I should put them on my list of great trios because they were. Anyway, from the start, the band made it a point, and referenced in the documentary, which you recommended, and thank you for that. We'll talk about it. They make it a point of being a band from Issaquah and not a band from Seattle, which is the biggest kind of city near the suburb of Issaquah, because they never wanted to be associated with the significantly larger and musically specific scenes of Seattle or Olympia, which I thought was cool. And also, specifically in the early years, very kind of suburban focused lyrics that were specific to location that wasn't a big city like Seattle, which I think is very cool about this band. They released their first EP, Blue Cadet 3, Do You Connect, on K Records in 1994, and followed that quickly with the single Broke, which was released by Sub Pop that same year. They then recorded what was intended to be their debut album, Sad Sappy Sucker, but due to label and legal delays, it was never actually released until 2001. The band then moved to Up Records, for whom they would finally release their debut, This Is a Long Drive for Someone with Nothing to Think About, and the EP Interstate 8. This band, Long Drive, was with someone with nothing to think about, and a lot of these song titles we'll talk about always has. I always talk about them in past tense. Long history of great album titles and great song titles. Issac is a very witty dude. Then in May of 1997, they went into an Olympia, Washington studio that would be Moon Studios with K Records owner and Beat Happening frontman Calvin Johnson to produce their sophomore album, The Lonesome Crowded West, which would be released on November 18th in 1997. This was my introduction to the band, as well as our topic of conversation tonight. In fact, that is why it is our topic of conversation tonight. So I'll just start there, and I want to hear from you. So, I made reference to this late 90s, early 2000s period as being super fruitful to me in terms of just loving a lot of the music that came out of that time. Along with Modest Mouse, the Decemberists, Portishead, Godspeed You Black Emperor, the Dismemberment Plan, Built to Spill, Murder City Devils, all bands that at the drive-in. There's dozens of bands that I fell in love with and still love to this day that formed and put out records at this time. Lonesome Crowded West was the first album I ever heard by Modest Mouse. I didn't get it right when it came out, but it was probably a year later, maybe a year and a half later. Immediately went back. The record that came out after this is actually a compilation, the name of which is completely escaping me now. But that Lonesome Crowded West and that record, why can't I think of the name of it? Were the two records that absolutely, were the things that I fell in love with, were kind of what made me love this band. And I never went much further beyond that. The Moon, Building Nothing Out of Something is the name of that record. And then The Moon in Antarctica is the record that follows that. Those three actually four records, because I went back to the first record, which is called, which I talked about, A Long Drive for Someone with Nothing to Do. Those four records make up kind of my entire Modest Mouse discography. They of course had a massive hit with Float On, that would kind of, cement them as kind of indie darlings and the good people for good. It's called Good News for People Who Hate Bad News, I think.
That's close.
Bad news, good news for people who love bad news. Catchy titles that I always forget and confuse. That I like that record. I bought that record, but really for me it was kind of those first four. And this one being kind of by far my favorite and the one that I've spent the most time with. But I haven't listened to this band in forever. So revisiting it to talk about it to you today was super exciting. So that was my little bit jumbled history with Modest Mouse. What's yours?
Well, quite a bit different. Modest Mouse has been an acquired taste for me over time. I was even a little bit late to the game to even check them out in the first place. It was probably the early 2000s that I ever even heard Modest Mouse for the first time. Interestingly, a lot of people that were friends of mine at the time and whose musical tastes I respected a lot, including, who's a person who is now my brother-in-law. One of the worst reasons you could ever doubt a band before you ever heard them or even really checked them out is that they're like the flavor of the month from the people that are younger than you.
Sure.
Right? Which is so wrong. It's so completely unfair to the band. It's completely unfair to those people. It's unfair to yourself, right? To have a predisposition about something. It's so stupid.
Yeah, I'm the king of it, man. I get it.
But you know what? That's kind of what happened. I was like, what's so special about this? Why do all of you guys think this is the best thing that you've heard in ever? Or, so... Yeah. Unfortunately, when you're a much younger person, you kind of let things like that throw a little stick in your spokes sometimes, which, again, nobody's fault but mine. So upon my first chance my first time of checking them out and chance to give them a much more fair shot and really check them out, I kind of dropped the ball on that. But jump ahead to later years as we get into the sort of the late aughts and early teens, and the woman that I am now married to has always proclaimed Modest Mouse as one of her favorite bands ever. So, and even then I wasn't like, okay, I'm in. It was still an acquired taste. And it actually wasn't until she started getting into, to take one step back, what you were listening to at the time. And that was another part of it too, that contemporary music for a certain, I've mentioned it on the show before, wasn't a big part of my life. Brick and mortar stores had closed down. I was living in the mountains now. I didn't get a computer or a cell phone till way after other people that was part of their standard lives, So there was really a gap that was unintentional also that kept me from keeping up with contemporary stuff and what was going on. Totally unintentional, but that was a little part of it as well. But at some point, I think in the teens, Katie started, was like, yeah, your record collection's great, but I'm going to get in the game here. And didn't go crazy, but I think she started out the right way by buying hard copies of things that meant a lot to her and that she really liked, which included not the entire Modest Mouse catalog, but a lot of it. So that allowed me to explore them a little more on more, let's say, I don't know, mature terms and a more reasonable approach to yeah, okay, if people really dig this band, I need to listen to them a little bit more. And through that, it's been a little bit more of an acquired taste. And then the couple times that I've gotten to see them live really added to that a lot. But that was the third time I saw that on Monday. The first time was completely erasable. It was one of those classic or non-classic nights at a big festival in a dusty field with the wind blowing hard. I don't care who was playing. I kind of wanted to just leave, you know what I mean? So Modest Mouse did not get a fair shake that night, but the ensuing 2 times that I've seen them, I not only really enjoyed them, but it's added to my appreciation of what they do. But way further on in their careers than I could have checked them out at.
It's funny, given our different trajectory with the band, that I think I've seen them in exactly the same scenario as you. I've seen them twice in kind of, theaters and once at a festival. So that's kind of my experience too. And the festival experience wasn't great. So it sounds like we had very, very similar experience. You use the phrase, it is, I don't know if you can hear that, but in Venice Beach, California, it is July 4th, about 364 days of the year. And now that we are looming on the actual day, there's lots of fireworks going off. So there's M80s going off by my window.
Oh, I thought for sure that was gunshots.
Yeah, that's on the 5th day, or the 365th day it's a gunshot, but every other day it's a firework. So you use the phrase acquired taste, and I actually think that is really applicable for this band. This band sounds like no other. They are immediately recognizable as Modest Mouse. If you know who they are, and if you don't, they are recognizable as something that sounds like nothing else. And, I think that is in large part, probably most significantly, due to Issac Brock's voice, which is very distinctive. And I think you either love it or it probably grates. I happen to love it. Or because they go from, it's not just the Pixies quiet loud thing. It's like quiet, like really abrasive grating thing. Almost Sonic, not they don't sound like Sonic Youth, but almost Sonic Youth-esque, the way they use noisy guitars and aggressiveness in their otherwise really pretty quiet songs. So I'm wondering when you decided, okay, Katie loves this band, I'm gonna finally kind of dig in a little bit here. Was there a kind of a learning curve, for lack of a better phrase, for you to start to appreciate them, or was it sort of like, oh shit, I've been missing this the whole time?
Yeah, not that much of a learning curve. I guess if there was any curve, it was that this particular album that we're discussing tonight became like my favorite work of theirs.
It did.
Yeah, for sure. I would list this as I am no expert on the entire catalog by any means, but I would definitely say this is my favorite record of their work.
Yeah, I feel pretty strongly that same way. And again, that comp, building nothing out of something, would be the other one that would be in contention for me, but it's a comp. So this podcast does not count that as your favorite record. I might argue that Dramamine, the first song on the first record, is the best song they've ever written, potentially. But as an album, to me, it's not even close. The Lonesome Crowded West is the one. Since Katie had so much to do with your appreciation or exposure, whatever word you want to use, I'm curious, what does she feel as strongly about Lonesome Crowded West, or does she have a different favorite or a strong opinion?
She has a very strong opinion about their earliest stuff being their best, which was really great because I don't have to spill all the beans about the show. We'll talk about it as we go through the episode. But the show I mentioned before the pandemic, when I was even less familiar with their entire catalog, Katie was blown away by the fact that they focused so heavily on so much great early stuff, avoided playing some hits. And so I honestly went into Monday Night's show. I can think of so many examples over time where I have seen a mind-blowing show from a band, and then you go see them the next time, and there's just no way it can compare, right? It just can't. Like, it's just, you saw something special in a special moment, yep. And the band's still going to be great, but, and fortunately, that wasn't really the case. They seem to focus pretty heavily on the early stuff. This album, I did a little research on, set list, even to how many songs were represented by each album. They played more songs off of this record than any other record Monday night.
Nice.
That led the way.
Man.
Yeah, and so there was no letdown from this memorable show, which is crazy to think it was already 3.5 years ago. But not only does time fly, the pandemic made time fly in a whole different way. And there was no letdown, man. It was fantastic, and for all the same reasons. They definitely eschewed some of the hits and focused heavily on the early stuff, and were great. So it was an example of like, all right, I kind of lowered the bar a little bit just in case, and didn't need to.
Man, I really wish I kept up with this band. They're one of those bands. I'd put Queens of the Stone Age into this category too, whose early records I just absolutely loved and saw them a bunch of times. And then, we talk about this. It's, there's only so much music you can listen to, and there's only so much time in the day and whatever. Bands I just completely stopped following for whatever reason, And I probably haven't seen Modest Mouse since 2007. And it doesn't occur to me for whatever reason to, even if they're playing, to even go. Like, it just doesn't. I don't know why. I love them, and it just doesn't occur to me. Like, I'd be like, oh, Modest Mouse playing. So a little bit of biography. The band. The only original member left in the band is Issac. Sadly, their drummer Jeremiah died of cancer just a few years ago. The bass player Jude. Yeah, right. Okay.
R.I.P.
And the bass player left to raise a family, a few years before that. So the only thing I know about the sort of band that kind of is Modest Mouse is that Dan Gallucci from the Murder City Devils, who plays on this record, toured with them periodically off and on. And that Johnny Marr of the Smiths played on some of their later records, but I have no idea who is in the band. I don't expect you to know necessarily the band members of Modest Mouse today, but any sense of, like, is it a bunch of hired hands? Is it like an actual band that Issac always works with now? Like, any sense of that? Like, what the lineup is like?
Only in comparison to that previous show where I saw them, which felt a little bit different in that. At the time, and I apologize for her name escapes me, but Isaac's longtime partner was playing with them for a while.
Oh.
A female multi-instrumentalist that was really interesting, and I thought added a lot of sort of interesting aspects to the band. I sucked in a lot of like multi-instrumentalism, like people were constantly switching instruments, not between each other, but what they were playing at the time and stuff. And I thought that was really cool. This time to me seemed a lot more stripped down, straight 4-piece. 2 guitars, bass, and drums with
okay.
on vocals.
Yeah, I don't know what maybe it's, I saw some footage when Johnny Marr is the band. I love Johnny Marr, and saw clips of that. And maybe this was my mental block about them having originally been a 3-piece, is I always think of them now as having like 9 people on stage, and I'm not sure why that is. So that's good to hear.
Yeah, I can't remember if they played as like a 5-piece or maybe 6 even. Maybe it was just 5 that previous time. I also had a way better view of the stage this time, so I took it in a little better. But it felt like more of a kind of a stripped down 4-piece. So.
How big a venue is this?
450 people.
Oh man, that's great. That's
and just perfect sight lines. Well, and to jump ahead in the story a little bit, for the second show in a row there, the first being Clutch, and now this one, my lovely wife late in the show was like, "I'm going down front." Like we would do in the old punk rock days, or we might have been there from the start, or maybe we would at the toward the end of the show. Like I'm going all the way front, but yeah, and got to just enjoy being straight up in the front row, and which I think was pretty fun because she said at the end, so they didn't do a set break. They played it all as one show, but it also was not just a straight encore where you go off stage for 2 minutes and come back. They said they played like, 3/4 of the show, I'm guessing, and said, okay, we need to take a little break now to get some oxygen, which bands playing at 8,000 feet sometimes do.
Okay.
And so they took an extended, like a 10 or more minute break.
Huh.
And then came on and played, which was essentially what was an encore, but a pretty long encore. I think it was like 5 songs or so. Huh. And then at the end of that, reached down, gave Katie a pretty nice squeeze on the hand, realizing that nice. She's a fan. And then as he's like getting ready to leave, she's just like, I had to yell something else. So she's like, come on, doing the cockroach, play doing the cockroach. And he kind of gives her a look like, we're done. Takes a few steps away, and then kind of realizing that she's truly a fan of the early stuff, pivots back and gives her another squeeze on the hand as a like, thank you.
That's so great.
You fan,
That's so great.
She was like, man, he didn't have to do that, and it's just I don't know, it's just nice. I definitely like it's obviously I'm not someone who has been seeing these guys for decades, and I don't have a lot of shows to compare to or whatever, but they and he in particular seems very just straightforward. Like, doesn't talk to the audience a lot, but when he does, it's just like having a conversation. It's not like, let me introduce this song, that's why I'm on the mic, and like just kind of like, hey, how you guys doing? You guys live here? Pretty nice place. Like, and I like that. There's a certain down to earth, and I want to let you jump in on that, but I also want to bring that up in reference to the documentary that we watched this week also. But
yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that because I was unaware of it. So yeah, we definitely should talk a little bit about that. He's a really unique person, as you describe, and I think he's had some challenges. There was some controversy with him that we don't need to get into necessarily tonight. But I think of him as a true artist. That he is all about his art, and that he lives like an artist's lifestyle. And I've always admired not only his talent, but the way he seems to conduct himself as an artist. And I think part of that is a little bit what you've described, whereas appreciation for people that appreciate his art, which is so cool. That intermission you mentioned, that never would have occurred to me necessarily playing at altitude, but that makes total sense. Did it seem like, and of all the bands you've seen in your time there, does it seem like that's planned, or they get like into the set and realize, oh shit, I'm winded, let's take a break?
Both. That's a really good question. I think I can remember Exene from X just kind of reacting to it, going like, I'm short of breath. It's a little tough to play up here. The other planned one would have been, I did have the pleasure of seeing Merle Haggard play here not too long before the end of his life. And his shtick was to have 2 naughty nurses come out and accompany him with oxygen tanks, but they were legit oxygen tanks. Like, he needed it and he was using it, but incorporated that into his show.
That's
which
hilarious.
Was like campy and weird, but it kind of worked because Merle Haggard can do whatever the fuck he wants. But so
Merle can get away with it.
Yeah. So to answer your question on that, it kind of goes both ways, I guess.
Yeah.
Some people get caught off guard. Some people are planning ahead.
That's funny. So it sounds like then, given your appreciation for this band and Katie's love and long history with this band, that this is a band that gets some regular spins on your turntable. And I'm guessing, given your appreciation for this specific album, this is a record you listened to with some degree of regularity. So it wasn't a bunch of new stuff to you when you got the assignment to listen to it last week?
Correct. And I haven't listened to it a ton. It's a double album. There's, it's got some length to it. I guess my favorite part about it, well, I love that you suggested it right as I was going to go, see the band, and that I'm certainly not familiar with all the material on this lengthy album, but that some of my favorite stuff I immediately not only recognized, but was like, yeah, like I don't know every song by title and all that necessarily, but
I don't either.
Yeah, but was like, oh yes, I love this, and then it was so perfect because I might not have listened to it as much before the show if we weren't doing an episode on it, so it really was, perfect timing, and it really it just enhanced my whole week has just been this Modest Mouse week, more so than any other.
That's so great.
Week in my life if I paid this much attention to this band. So yeah, it's been really fun like that. And
well, as we go through, call out the songs that they played, because it's going to make me jealous that I wasn't there, but definitely want to know. I would say always challenging with this record. And of course, I had it on CD, was with the format I was buying at the time. This record's way too fucking long. It's 74 minutes long. Even though it's all good songs, there's at least 3 songs on it, in my opinion, that they should have dumped, and probably more, and maybe kept for other records or other releases or whatever. But the record's too fucking long, man. This is the time when people were just shoving way too much. It's like the melancholy and the infinite sadnessing of albums, where it's like, man, just feel free to edit. Just because you can fit that much music onto a CD doesn't mean you should. And again, I'm not saying there's a bunch of garbage on this record, because there's not, but it's still too fucking long, man.
Well, what I would say a little bit different from what you said, I totally agree, except instead of excluding particular songs, there's some songs on this, including some of my favorite songs on this record, that go on way too long. Like, it's a song that, like, that was fantastic. The extra 3 or 4 minute outro could maybe be left off. I would sort of argue that, because almost always when we talk about an album having to, as you said, there's not filler on this record, but a lot of records we talk about, there are some filler on it, of like editing specific songs out, like, man, that could have been on the compilation later on, or that could have been a B-side later on. I would argue that on this, more so than leaving particular songs off, that I think they could have made certain songs more succinct.
I sort of disagree. I don't want to spoil things too much, but the longest song on this record is a song that I think that they could have lost. I don't love it anyway. I mean, I think it's fine, but I don't love it anyway. The next 3 longest songs on the record are 3 of my favorites on the record, and I wouldn't shorten any of those, because I think the long outro parts and the long mid sections are what make them so cool. So we'll get into that as we talk, but okay. Yeah, whatever the methodology is, the record's too long, because that's why you can't name all the songs, or you don't know every song, because it's too much to absorb.
Well, like you said, it's from, I mean, I do believe it's specific to that era.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean,
for sure.
Well, cool. I know we want to get into the record, but real quick, I do want to touch on the documentary a little bit.
Please.
That I don't think you had seen until this week. I watched it once before, and totally enjoyed it. Kind of forgot about it a little bit. I mean, maybe I wasn't into the band as much at that point. And then leading up to this week, Katie was like, "Oh, we should watch that documentary again." I was like, "Oh, good call!" Like, absolutely. I really loved it. It showed a side to the band that, as I said before, I got into the band a little bit later. I didn't think that Modest Mouse instantly blew up like they were some band who put out a single that caught fire and they all of a sudden signed a massive record deal and I wasn't never under that impression. However, watching that gave me a greater appreciation for their roots of being what most great bands do, is buy a van, renovate it, tour in the van relentlessly, drive all over, gig and gig and gig in the DIY and punk rock style. Like, it was important to me to see that side of the band. So that's one of the things that I really enjoyed about
I am totally with you. The movie we are talking about is a 96-minute documentary that Pitchfork put out specifically around this record. It's called Modest Mouse, the Lonesome Crowded West. And it is great. It's just really good. It talks about, like Rod said, kind of the origins of the band and about specific songs in the record and what the lyrics meant. And they talk to a variety of interesting people. Dan Gallucci of Murder City Devils, as I mentioned, Dan Marsh of Dave Marsh of Built to Spill, and several of Elliott Smith is in it. It's great. And I just lost my train of thought as I said Dan, and I saw you catch me, and then I remembered it was corrected myself that it was Dave Marsh.
Doug Marsh.
Oh, is it Doug?
It is Doug.
Oh fuck, man. Yeah. All right, Doug Marsh. I would edit that out, but I won't. I'm having trouble. I couldn't remember any Modest Mouse album titles. I'm butchering dudes' names. I'm having issues.
The M80s have you on edge. It's okay.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I'm struggling. Let's talk a little bit of. Oh, I know what I was going to say. So, I'm not going to definitively make this statement, although it might be an episode worth doing at some point. I think maybe the best music. Let's say my favorite music, because that makes it less controversial. I think my favorite music is not metal or punk, but it is music that is made by people who are into metal or punk. People that have that in them that then make other kinds of music generally make the most interesting music. Sonic Youth comes to mind. I just mentioned Sonic Youth. Built to Spill comes to mind with Donnie Marsh. And Modest Mouse, and that this documentary really kind of speaks to that. Not only the way they tour, but Issac Brock is playing like a Charvel style guitar that clearly nobody plays those guitars unless you're into metal. He's wearing a Napalm Death t-shirt at one point. There's an Iron Maiden t-shirt in that documentary. I just think there is. And I think that's why there's really loud, aggressive parts, because they probably love really loud and aggressive music, even though that's, not kind of necessarily the kind of band they are. So I think that's a cool thing about bands like this. And a lot of bands of this era, kids that grew up as hardcore kids or metal kids, and then they become a little more proficient on the instruments. They get a little more worldly, want to play different kinds of things. Death Cab for Cutie, another band I love from this time period, kind of the same thing. I just think that's kind of a really cool thing that all of us as kids are like frustrated or pissed or sad or whatever, and listen to this angry, aggressive music, and then bring other things into our world. And I think Modest Mouse is one of those things.
Yeah, and I think it paid good dividends that their decision to work with K Records. I mean, a legendary independently owned and run and recorded record label, right? Like I think that background shows. That's what one of the biggest things I got out of that documentary is that when I first heard them in early 2000s, after sounding what they sound like from this record and onward, I never would have guessed that would have been their background, and I didn't know that at the time. And I like that it is, and it is and was.
Same.
Yeah.
Before we get into the songs, talk a little bit about the album cover, because I love all of their art. This band has really good. Everything about them, their sort of their packaging, their song titles, obviously Issac Brock's lyrics, their presentation, I'm really enamored by, and I just absolutely love this album cover.
I'm so glad you brought that up. This is the only double album that I own, even though technically Katie owns it. That not only does it not have a gatefold or anything like that, it's a double album released as two totally separate entities.
Oh, interesting.
Like it's two separate albums, but it's one album. But they are two completely separately packaged things with their own spines. I'm a big spine person. I was a librarian in college. I like spines. And one of my favorite things about this spine is that it only says Modest. These are two separate records, but it only says Modest Mouse if you can hold the two records together.
Oh, that's cool.
And you can also, if you choose to, I only know, from looking at the digital format, the order, and you had this on CD, so you know the order that the songs were meant to be in.
Right.
But for a while, I was like, which album is actually first? Because they're listed on both records, side A, side B, side A, side B. So there's actually no hint. Like if you just bought this and you didn't know anything about this band, you'd never looked up the songs or anything on a streaming service, you'd say, well, which album is first? Which is kind of interesting. In fact, if you were to hold them in opposite order, lower on the spine, it would form, or in this case, higher, the name Modest Mouse also, so that you could literally put these in either order, and it would form the band name on the spine.
Oh, interesting.
And it only listed, as I said, as side A, side B, side A, side B. So there's a little bit of ambiguity to it, which I don't know. I just happen to think as
we go through the songs, I want you to tell me what are the lead songs on the sides, because that will be very interesting to me. So let's do that.
It is interesting, yeah. I'm
also going to give you a episodes recommendation. You will need to make it because it's more in your wheelhouse than mine. But what you just showed is an example of how cool packaging became during the CD, vinyl packaging specifically, during the CD era, because bands had to, it was an extra effort to put out an album at that point because albums weren't the dominant selling format. So more love and care was put into those packages, and through to this day, all of the boutique labels, Third Man and Southern Lord and dozens of others that do cool vinyl releases, the packaging has just become, it's always been important to vinyl, but has become really cool and intricate and just really kind of awesome. It would be fun to do an episode, like a list episode of the 10 coolest vinyl packages you have, kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Because that is obviously one of the very cool aspects of vinyl.
No doubt about that. And I've always, from the first time that Katie got this record and I got to enjoy it, have loved it. I'd like to know if there's any other example of a double album that was released as two separately packaged 12-inch records.
But could you buy them individually or no?
I doubt that. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know. I think it was like marketed and purchased as one album, but I just think it's interesting that they put it in two totally separate sleeves and all of it.
And is that's the way they released it on vinyl in 1997, or was that like a reissue kind of thing?
That's my understanding. Correct me if I'm wrong, but when I was reading about it up to this week, it mentioned that. I read about that, and my reading was that is how it originally came out.
Oh, that's so cool.
I hope I'm not wrong. I could be corrected. I may have missed something in my reading, and that could have been a reissue. But when I was reading about it, I that's what I took, is that's how it was originally released. That is really cool.
All right, we are not going to be able to get, well, as long as this record it is 15 songs, so it's not completely unmanageable. We don't need to belabor every one of these 15 songs. But we do need to belabor track one, side one, Rodney. What do you have to say about the great Teeth Like God's Shoeshine?
It's a track one, side one. Let's see what Rodney says.
I do think that it is a very good song, but not without my constructive criticism. Also, a little bit.
Let's have it.
Number one, it's almost 7 minutes long.
Yeah.
My criticism of this song is not so much of the song, but of its spot as the opener. So that would be one thing. It's, a 7-minute opener, unique, but maybe not the best selection as the opener. Just kind of throwing that out there. Another thing is a lot of records we talk about, and I think in our last Joy Division episode, the three of us talked a lot of it about how some of the slower, darker songs were some of our favorites. Blah blah. Everything we talk about of faster, more aggressive songs versus slower songs. A good portion of the time, you'll probably catch me on this podcast saying that I'm kind of a sucker for more aggressive, like faster stuff.
Mm-hmm.
With this band, I kind of like it more when Issac sings as opposed to shouts. I don't dislike when he shouts at all. In fact, I will say that I had to make a little note here that I would be a total hypocrite if I didn't say that when I saw them live, that after playing like a succession of slower stuff, I got really excited when they played more aggressive stuff, and there was a little more shouting going on. But for me, for this record, and then like on studio releases, it's a little bit different. It's a little bit of the opposite. I have no problem with this being the opening track on the record. I think it's a good song. I got no problem with that. I just have my couple little, I don't know. It's a longer song, and there is a whole part that goes into a nice break where it's not just shouting, right? That it gets a little more moody and a little bit slower. Like that's a great part of the song, as you said. A lot of the middle parts of their songs are so great. But I'll stop talking and say that I think it's a damn good song. I think it's fine. Not necessarily would be my selection as the opener, and I got a couple drawbacks on
it. You didn't say anything I necessarily have to disagree with, except that this is one of my all-time favorite Modest Mouse songs. I absolutely love it. I love the contrast between the aggressive vocal and the quiet singing vocal that all sounds so pained and sincere, which I just love. That sort of dual persona of Issac Brock, where he goes from this pained sincerity to this like frustrated anger. I really love that juxtaposition of those two kind of voices of his. Being suburban kids that spent lots of times in shopping malls, the lyrics are very kind of hit, the let's all have another orange Julius, thick syrup standing in line, it's just great, and his all of the explanation about how he was so frustrated, and part of his want to not be associated with Seattle was the sort of paving of America, and putting up these kind of monstrosities, and just to express it in this way. The malls are all soon to be ghost towns. Well, so long, farewell, goodbye. This dude can write fucking great lyrics. And the way the song opens with kind of the little brief feedback before it just kind of jumps immediately in is I think it's just so effective. I just absolutely love this song. And as there's one more section of the record that definitely could compete for my 3-song sequence, but you know, we talk about how rarely or well, how obvious picking the first three songs can be, but it's all I can do for this record. That my favorite three song sequence on this album is Teeth Like God's Shoe Shine, Hard Cook's Brain, and Convenient Parking. I just absolutely love each of those three songs. In fact, Convenient Parking is my favorite song on the record. So we'll get to that. But I love this stretch, and it's a great, those three songs I think in particular are just a great way to open a record.
Gotcha. Rarely will you ever hear me say that one of the most slamming songs on the record, which also is the opener, doesn't get like a higher grade from me.
Right.
That's pretty rare. But as we continue to talk about the record, these listenings also made me realize that I think I like their mellower stuff a little more.
Yeah. Well, and this record has a lot of variation. Like there's a lot of different moods and tones on this record, which is one of the things that makes it so great. So again, you know, because I love all three of the first three songs in this record. Well, for me, I'll just say this now, and you can just pick where you want to talk. The first three songs I love. When we get into Lounge and Jesus Christ Was an Only Child, both those songs are fine. I don't really care about either of them. But then when you get into Doing the Cockroach, Cowboy Dan, and Trailer Trash, that's the other part that competes for me as one of the great three-song sequences on this record. So take that where you want to go in terms of what you love in this kind of first part of the record, and tell me where the break is. Like, where does the side end that includes Teeth Like God's Shoe Shine?
Yes, I would love to. First of all, since it's part of your favorite three-song sequence, you will be happy to know that they did play Heart Cook's Brain on Monday night. So that was enjoyable. As far as let me grab the physical copy here. So it is is it off? Gosh. You know what? I think it is specifically divided into each four sides are four songs.
Oh, okay. So closing time is the last song on that side.
Wait. Well, Baby Blue Sedan.
I didn't you say four songs on that side?
Yeah. So maybe I have a reissue that has a different sequencing.
Yeah. So the sort of CD streaming release goes Teeth Like God's Shoe Shine, Heart Cook's Brain, Convenient Parking, Lounge.
Aha. It's a little different on this version that I have. Those first three are the same. And then a track called Baby Blue Sedan wraps up the first side.
Yeah, that song isn't Baby Blue Sedan.
Okay. So.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so I'm looking at it right now. I mean, I guess we could have just done some reading. So the double vinyl edition released on Up Records includes the extra track, Baby Blue Sedan, and a slightly reordered track listing. Rather than having a gatefold cover to house both records or putting both records in a single cover, the double vinyl release was shipped in two different covers. The 2014 vinyl reissue on Glacial Pace contains the same track listing and the two cover configuration. So there's actually 16 songs on your version.
Yes, that is correct.
I've never heard that song before, Baby Blue Sedan.
Okay. Well, I apologize if you.
No, that's great. Tell me about it.
It's honest. Well, it's not a song that particularly grabbed me.
Okay.
So,
all right. Well, that's good.
Yeah. I was gonna actually get on to the second side, to essentially agree with you that the first two tracks, Jesus Was an Only Child, Doing the Cockroach, which I think is a classic of theirs, but for me, the record starts to get sweetest with Cowboy Dan and Trailer Trash as I sort of mentioned a little bit before that this band has hooks without having hooks, right? There's no catchy choruses. There's no like super sing-along
It's like catchy
thing.
lines.
Right.
Yeah.
Which I totally, I say that with as a description of respect. It's cool. I love catchy choruses. I love melody. I love all of that. But that's not, if you're gonna listen to this band, if you're gonna sign up for this record, that's not what you're getting. And I like that. It's to its credit. But for me, that's where kind of the sweet part of the record starts. Kind of cool, quick side note. So you told me to mention when we get to songs that they played. Not only did they close the show on Monday night with Cowboy Dan, Katie went back and looked at set lists, and when she saw them in the year 2000 at the legendary 40 Watt Club in Athens, Georgia, she goes, they closed the show with Cowboy Dan that night too. So
that's awesome.
That's pretty cool. 24 years apart, and they closed the show with the same song, and so that was pretty fun.
Yeah, that is Cowboy. Those two songs, Doing the Cockroach. Well, sorry, Cowboy Dan and Trailer Trash are two of the best songs on the record.
Trailer Trash is a great song.
Trailer Trash is so good, and just the line, Cowboy Dan was a major player in the cowboy scene. I can't get the melody now, but that line is like an earworm. And again, you're right. It's like it's not a chorus. It's not a big melodic part. It's just that line. Mm-hmm. And this record and their catalog is filled with those where it's just kind of one line that is just in there, you know?
Absolutely. That's really well put. I mean, I think that maybe that's why this band was a little bit more of an acquired taste for me. It's a lot easier to get into a band that you've heard a song 2 times and the chorus is so catchy that you're like, yeah, I love that song. This band requires digging way deeper than that. So once again, credit.
For sure.
Before I hand it back to you, I have to expand because you said that this section sort of came in second place for your favorite 3-song sequence. So I'm going to go ahead and say that this is my favorite 3-song sequence. Cowboy Dan, Trailer Trash, and then a little bit of a wraparound. So that is where Trailer Trash ends, side 2. So I'm doing a little bit of a wraparound here for my favorite 3 because a song I like a whole lot, Out of Gas, kicks off side 3. So those 3 together, Cowboy Dan, Trailer Trash, and Out of Gas, would be my favorite 3 sequence.
Got it. I thought the section of the documentary where they talk about Trailer Trash is pretty great, and I love the way Issac Brock talked about it because, you know, the song is really kind of sad, you know, and paints this sort of, you know, the song's called Trailer Trash. And he talks about having lived in a trailer park, but in the documentary, he talks about how it was great. Like, you know, it's just like living in a neighborhood and it was fine and it wasn't bad at all. And, you know, he wrote a song from some other perspective. But I love that notion of, you know, and maybe because of some of my family's affiliation with trailer park, is that, you know, it's fun. Like, that's a totally normal way for people that need that afford to live in that situation to live. It's not 8 Mile, you know.
Yeah, but and also I would say another thing that I really like about his lyrics and vocal approach are that a lot of his, because he is so masterful with like his plays on words and song titles and album titles and things like that. A lot of his lyrics are kind of playful, but don't sound like that. Like the way they're presented. So I guess I'm saying the opposite of what you just said, also as a compliment, right? Like he could take a very serious theme or lyric and present it as, hey, nothing wrong with living in a trailer park. But he can also like bring up sort of like little wordplay and kind of like a fun approach to lyrics, but the way they're presented vocally don't sound like they're meant to be playful. So it's sort of a good like interwoven thing. I guess.
Yeah, totally agree. I think there's something about him. I don't mean to compare him to Bob Dylan, but I will. And I'm trying to think of Nick Cave. I would put into this category of singers who kind of bring you into their world. Like they're not presenting their music song by song. It's almost like, well, now you're in this Modest Mouse world where things are slightly askew, and the terrain looks a little bit different, and there's this character called Cowboy Dan over here, and there's some trailer trash over here, and it all feels part of this interconnected world rather than a bunch of independent scattershot songs. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it does for sure.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned Out of Gas, though. Out of Gas and the next song, which is Long Distance Drunk, are two of the songs that I wrote down as like I could take them or leave them. Like they're two of my least. And again, I don't think there's any bad songs, no songs I dislike on this record, but to me they felt a little bit lesser and just not songs that really ever resonated with me that much.
I really like side 3. I do like Out of Gas, but it doesn't, of the 4 songs on that side, it doesn't even make the top 2.
Oh, interesting. So,
and even though that it's part of my favorite 3-song sequence, it doesn't even make the top 2 songs on this 4-song side.
And so I'm keeping up with what you're looking at. That side is Out of Gas, Long Distance Drunk, Shit Luck, and Trucker's Atlas?
Yes.
Okay, got it. Well, Shit Luck and Trucker's Atlas, Shit Luck fucking rules. I absolutely love that song. And I never noticed until I was listening this week that riff, that main guitar riff in this song, speaking of Issac Brock probably being a metalhead, sounds a lot like Paranoid, Black Sabbath's Paranoid. It does that which I never connected before, but man, what a great fucking song. And a screaming song.
Yeah, and a screaming song, a great bass part.
Great bass part, yeah.
A great bass part. It sounds fairly different from not only the rest of the songs on this record, but a lot of the songs in their catalog, I think.
Totally agree.
I got really into it because, I've said it before, streaming services, in my opinion, or at least the cheap ones I use, have really bad, what's the term I'm looking for? Your not analog, but
compression.
That decides, the AI that decides what it's going to
algorithm.
Yes, thank you. Logarithm.
Bad algorithm.
Yeah, I always combine those two. Anyways.
Yeah, we're working tonight.
Algorithm, yes. And for whatever reason, like, this song constantly comes up, which is fine because I really dig this song, and it made me dig it more. But I sort of had the assumption of like, oh, this is clearly like one of their most popular songs, only to like look on their Spotify plays. I'm like, oh, that's not even in the top 5. They just have their freaking algorithm planned out so that or whatever, so that it plays constantly, at least on my my system. But again, no problem, because I really dig this song and it made me dig it even more. But that makes the perfect segue to, I can't remember in a while when we've done our listening for a podcast when I had a certain relationship with a song like this. So Trucker's Atlas, definitely a big song for me. And why not? Anyone that listens to the show,
Atlas.
laden with geography, and opens up with a line about Colorado. So, I mean, there you go. But through the course of my listenings, I went through going, oh, this is my Halo on the record. And then I went, oh, no, this is my favorite song on the record.
Oh, wow.
And then I went, I think this is my favorite Modest Mouse song.
No kidding.
again, for a lot of those, and it's also a great song, like sonically. But for the aforementioned reasons, throw a little geography in there, and you've got me reeled in, hook, line, and sinker. And then before the show, I said to Katie, I really hope that they play Trucker's Atlas and song 2. They didn't even keep me waiting. Like song 2 went right into it. So
that kind of surprises me.
Just love that. Like they brought it right out and had me hooked on the show immediately, and yeah, it was great. So I love that song.
Well, that sort of is in conflict a little bit with what you said at the top, in that it's at 11 minutes. It's by far the longest song on the record.
Yes, and I did say that. And when they played it on Monday, they clearly
truncated it.
Did not play the 11-minute version of that. Like I don't know what the running time was, but they clearly didn't go into the whole super extended outro.
Right.
So,
right. Got it. Yeah, that's a jam. What do you think about it specifically resonates with you?
Geography.
You're like, if it was called like Truckers Work Boots, you'd be like, it's fine.
Well, no, not the title, but I mean the specific mentionings of different places around the country.
So the lyrics or what? Resonates?
Yeah, I'm going to go to Colorado. I'm going to go to New York City. I'm going to go to Arizona. I'm going to go to Alaska. I'm going to go start up in the Pacific Northwest corner and go down to California. Like,
right.
Like I love that. At some point, we will be doing a favorite geography song list.
That's a good idea. So, that's a good idea.
There's a lot of good ones, and I can already,
well, interestingly enough, Trucker's Atlas is followed by Polar Opposites, which is one of the most, according to Spotify listens, it is the single most popular song on this record. No, sorry, second most popular, behind A Heart Cook's Brain, at 12 million listens. Interesting because in reading about this record, Issac Brock doesn't like this song at all. Because as he described it, it was too easy for him to write. And so he sort of dismissed it as being a little bit slight and uninteresting. And I guess they almost never play it. And I absolutely love it. I think it's great. One of the poppier songs in the record, but man, is it, you talk about how so much of their songs aren't necessarily hooky. Polar Opposites is hooky and just a really great song.
I love this. It's my halo on the record. It's talking about that sort of juxtaposition that we just talked about. Is that it's one of the poppier and more hooky songs on the record, and it's dark. I mean, drinking away the part of the day that I couldn't sleep away. I mean, that's dark. But incredibly the closest thing there is to I think a hook on this record. So I also love that kind of juxtaposition of dark, but in this sense darker lyrically, but a little more playful sonically. Sometimes it's the other way around with these guys, but one of my favorite songs on the record. For sure.
Yeah, it's great. So, just to reference the Aspen shows, something that's really badass is they played 2 completely different sets.
I was wondering, I was busy at work all day today. I did not get a chance to look at last night's set list.
Yeah, it's completely different.
Very cool.
They played Doing the Cockroach was the second song they played last night.
Interesting.
And Out of Gas, Tiny Cities Made of Ash is such a great song. I'm just kind of glancing at it. Trailer Trash, Dramamine, Float On. They played a cover of A Forest, the Cure song.
Yeah, they did that. And you know what? So we were talking earlier. I didn't want to say I wasn't sure they played in Denver. They did, and they played that there as well.
That's so great.
Looking at, yeah, absolutely.
All right, now I'm pissed that I missed them.
Well, my wife's going to be really pissed. There was some discussion of going to last night's show. It was fairly pricey to go to the first show, a little too pricey to go to 2 shows. But that's a pretty good set list.
it's really good. All right, mum's the word. Hopefully she doesn't listen to our podcast.
Oh, I'm going to tell her as soon as we get off the air, but.
All right. So 2 songs close the record, Bankrupt on Selling, which I absolutely love, and Styrofoam Boots / It's All Nice on Ice, All Right. What do you think? I love Bankrupt on Selling. I'm curious about how you feel about these songs, but specifically the closer, because we talk, you often reference the weird closer. I don't know that this is a weird closer, but it definitely has one of those long outros you mentioned. So curious about how you feel about the way the record wraps up.
Well, Bankrupt is not a song that I had paid much attention to at all until they played it on Monday night. So there you go. Now you're really bummed that you missed the show. They did play that. And as far as the closer, I actually like it because I think sometimes when bands put a slash between songs to like insinuate that it's sort of 2 different songs rolled into one. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't. Sometimes I'm like, why'd you need to do that? This is just kind of one song. And I really like how that's not the case with this, that it feels like 2 songs. I mean, there's actually like visually where the slash is, you can sort of hear that in the song. Like it feels like it goes into a different song. Like not radically different, it doesn't go into a, fast-paced shouting song as opposed to a quieter song, but it clearly, there's a demarcation point where it feels like it goes into a different song. And I like that. If you're going to put that on your record, you're going to put the slash mark on there, then make it like that.
I'm with you.
And I think
I like Brock's explanation of it too. I guess that he was playing that first part, which I guess is technically styrofoam boots, and Jeremiah and Eric were trying to figure out when to come in, and they couldn't kind of figure out when to join, and then ultimately started playing this rhythm that was, to your point, kind of effectively just different, this coda that ended up being this completely different song, and then he added that It's All Right on Ice, All Right kind of lyric on top of it. So I think it's a really cool way to end the song, and that sort of the duality of it speaks to some of the stuff we were talking about of the 2 different kind of sides of Modest Mouse, which I think really works well as a way to end the record.
Mm-hmm.
Anything we missed on any of those 16 songs on the version you are familiar with?
No, I don't think so. I had said kind of everything I felt about it. I'm still learning, it's a double album. And when you see a band play and then they play some of the songs off it, which definitely a couple examples that I brought up were not necessarily songs. They played some songs that I dig the most, like Trucker's Atlas. They also played some songs that I hadn't really paid attention to that much before. And then that makes you kind of go back and hear those in a different way. So that's fun as well.
So because I mentioned it about Polar Opposites, we haven't talked about it this much, at all really tonight. And something I like to do to just kind of get a sense of the band's popularity on the biggest streaming service of the world, that being Spotify. How many monthly listeners do you think Modest Mouse has, roughly?
Oh God, I don't know. Somewhere into the millions, I would think.
It is in the millions. It is, but let me give you a barometer here. Just so Built to Spill, since they've come up a couple of times, has 400,000. Sonic Youth, who we've talked about tonight, has 1.5 million monthly listeners. So if Sonic Youth has 1.5 million and Built to Spill has 400,000, how many do you think Modest Mouse has?
I'm not good with the numbers, but I don't know. 3 million?
It's a good guess. 4 million, 3.9 million.
Yeah.
And I think that is indicative of Spotify in this kind of format, right? That is almost, I'm sure, almost exclusively based on the popularity of Float On. That song has 423 million listens. Their next closest song has 100 million, and their next closest after that has 75 million. So Float On is doing the bulk of the work there.
Yeah, I did look at that.
You have one, it's like the old days of radio. You have one hit, and that's going to carry your popularity on a streaming service, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah. Well, hopefully that translates to the popularity of our show. Hopefully we get a few extra tune-ins this week doing some Modest Mouse.
We're talking about Modest Mouse, although the wrong record, I guess, technically, but that's okay. That's okay.
Exactly.
Before we go, let's do Keep One, Lose One.
All right.
I will go first. I'm going to keep a song that we didn't even really talk about, but I love it dearly. Convenient Parking is the song that I'm going to keep. It is a great one. And the song I'm going to lose, out of respect for you, I'm going to lose Long Distance Drunk. And I don't mean you're a long distance drunk. I mean, I'm not selecting Out of Gas because I know you like that song. So those are my Keep One, Lose One. What about you?
All right. My Keep One, as much as I raved about Trucker's Atlas, I'm actually going to say Polar Opposites. I just really like that a lot. Like when I think that's really indicative of whether Isaac likes that song or not, whether they play it these days or not. When I hear that song, it makes me feel like I'm listening to Modest Mouse as much as anything on this record. So enough said. I'm gonna pick Polar Opposites.
Yeah, I'm with you.
For one to lose. I think
we did it, Rodney. Anything else you want to say about the Lonesome Crowded West or Modest Mouse tonight?
I don't think so. Other than I didn't pick a lose, but I don't have to.
Oh wait, I'm sorry. Yes, you do. I'm sorry. Yes, you do.
I know you're probably gonna hold me to that. I won't pick the added song that makes the 16th. That would be unfair. Jesus Christ Was an Only Child. We could probably do without that one.
I don't really like that song very much either. I'm with you on that. Okay, we did it. We did it. That's Modest Mouse, folks. I hope we get back to them. I really love them, and I think I'm gonna start getting them back into some rotation and maybe dig into some of the records I don't know as well. But that was a fun conversation. I'm jealous that you got to see them. So maybe I'll figure out a way next time to check them out.
Well, especially if they come back here.
Yeah, that would.
You will have no excuse. I invited you on very short notice this time, but next time it will be a longer notice invite.
Yeah, and I'm so bummed I didn't. I'm such a stickler for planning, and I wish I wasn't. And we had a house guest and whatever. But yeah, so next time for sure. And I want to see that venue in your town and the whole lot of it. So that's a different conversation for a different day. The conversation we will be having next week will not include Rodney, in fact, due to some scheduling conflicts, nor will it include Glenn. I will be back with Dave to once again talk about Black Sabbath. We are continuing that very long journey through their post Ozzy and Dio discography. We will be talking about 1994's Cross Purposes, so that will be next week. In the meantime, check out huntsmanhill.com for past episodes. Please check us out on YouTube if you haven't yet. We're still kind of building out that channel, but excited about that and getting some good responses so far. Send comments and suggestions to huntsmanhillpodcast@gmail.com. We are on Instagram and Twitter, of course. My band Manhunt's Man just put out a new record. It's called Camelot Rots. Please check that out on Spotify and Apple Music and everywhere else. I'm pretty proud of that one. And of course, you must check out the HHPP Spotify playlist, where you will now hear Cowboy Dan from Modest Mouse's The Lonesome Crowded West. A great song and a great record. Go check it out. Rodney, good to see you, my friend. Hopefully next time in 2 weeks when we get back to One Hit Wonders, I hope. The technical difficulties will be behind us.
All right. Well, great selection, Mike. Really enjoyed talking about it, and thanks to everybody for listening. And we will see you soon.
Yes, you will. And Rodney, please tell your wife that she has excellent taste.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, guys. Thank you.